Yo guys, what is going on? Blossoms back and welcome to a very exciting video because today we're going to ask we're going to answer a very important question. Which boss had the worst challenge? Okay, now we have reviewed a lot of these packs over the course of almost a year, and I have all of those on record because, you know, I make the tier list myself, so I have them saved and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of us can agree that a lot of these special tag challenges, these boss challenges, well, let's just say their collection of cars provided for the player aren't optimal. Okay, they aren't great. A lot of these guys have really bad collections. So today I want to answer the age-old question: who had the worst of the worst? Okay, so in today's video, it's gonna be a bit of fun. We're gonna look back down memory lane at all these boss challenges that we've had. I know Lady Blackwood isn't here, and I just don't think that Lady Blackwood is going to be getting a conventional challenge, right? The first one we ever had was Gaz, who is the first boss that you encounter in the campaign. And now we're at Legrand, who is the last boss you will encounter in the campaign. So it makes sense for this challenge theme to die at Legrand. But you never know. They might just genuinely have forgotten Lady Blackwood and put her in for the next, month or whatever. But anyway, today we're going to answer a very simple question. Who had the worst challenge? Comment down below, who do you think was the answer? Okay? Anyway, let's get into it. So like I said, it's a little fun one. I've got a little arbitrary point system here. So very simple guideline. Cars will be valued as they were when their challenge was live. Okay? And I'll talk more about that later on. Okay? But hopefully that makes sense. And here's how I'm going to rate everything. So for a car that I previously put in highly versatile, that's going to get 8 points per car. Versatile gets 5 points per car, followed by 3, 2, and 1. Okay, and we're gonna start off with what started all of it: Gaz's collection. Yes, back when it followed a theme, ladies and gentlemen. Every car here was from the UK, which I really do appreciate that they were at least sticking to the theme at the start, but obviously that all went haywire after a while. Gaz's collection consisted of 59 cars, and in total it has amassed 186 points, giving it a total of 3.152. That's a score. So basically what I did was that I basically added, the points from each tier, because so for example, highly versatile 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So there are 8 cars. Each of the cars get 8 points. So from just highly versatile alone, they get 64 points in total. Hopefully that makes sense. So I added all those points together. We got 186, and then obviously I divided, the way averages work, right? I divided it by the total amount of cars. So yeah, at the bottom over here is going to be the total score, right? So comment down below who you think is the highest, but also who you think has the lowest. There are a lot that are, in this range of 3.1 and below. So this was Gaz's collection. You guys remember this? This was a challenge that started everything, right? There were some decent legendaries here, putting more of an emphasis on radicals. Honestly, this was a pretty smart car pull, because not only did it stick to the theme, but it focused on the radicals, because obviously radicals, they're not going to get their own event because of the brand that they're from. I feel like honestly these challenges would have been a great way to utilize KTMs, but we didn't see a lot of KTMs being used, which is a little bit sad. Koenigsegg's as well, actually, because you're not really gonna get a Koenigsegg event, are you? You will get some Swedish events here and there. I do digress on that one. But yeah, this was the first challenge. A lot of really bad cars down here, some really bad legendaries. It's a nice trip down memory lane because a lot of these cars have actually gone to epic, right? At least these 3 Bentleys are all epic now. No, this one's still a legendary, but this is an epic now. This Range Rover is an epic now. I actually don't know if this Bentley is an epic or not. And I think this Range Rover here is a super rare now as well. So there are some changes. These Mulsans went up in RQ, which is absolutely crazy. But yeah, anyway, that was Gaz's collection. Moving on is Marilyn's collection. This was the second one that ever came out, and over here we have a total score of 3.245, so that's higher than Gaz's collection, which makes sense. I do think that Marilyn's collection is a better collection compared to Gaz's collection. Look at the cars that you see here, highly versatile. You're getting some really good cars actually, like the Cadillac Blackwing, the Charger Hellcat, as well as the Hennessy. But what really makes this, tag, I guess, stand out above Gaz, I think, is that there are just more cars in the higher ranks, less cars in the lower ranks. Versatile, there were some decent cars that were given out here, like the Slammer. The Borrego was good at the time. So remember, like I said, guideline, right? I'm judging them on how they were when the tag came out. So a Borrego back then, You know, like how many months ago, a year ago, 8 months ago, whenever Marilyn's collection came out, the Borrego back then was a fantastic car. It was an epic. It was easy to fully upgrade. Now that Borrego is a legendary, I would put the Borrego in requires a special tag challenge, or just overrated, or Robin's Wonderful plus or minus 3 RQ, right? I'll put it way lower, but I'm judging these cars for how useful they were at the time when the challenge was live, right? Then moving on to requires some criteria, it's pretty interesting that I actually put the Wildcat in requires some criteria, because that actually went down to an ultra rare, and honestly it's a very good ultra rare. If you watch any of my videos on the best ultra rares for any track set, the Wildcat shows up a couple of times, and honestly speaking, I think the Wildcat was actually a pretty decent RQ65. There were so many more 65s at the time that could have gone down over the Wildcat in my opinion, so I'm gonna stick to my guns here, and keep that in requires some criteria. But yeah, there were some decent cars in this tag. Obviously the main trash here was just like the all surface and off-road tire stuff. Yeah, fair enough. Alright, moving on. Tuma's collection is up next. Tuma's collection. Does anyone remember this one? This had a an absolutely terrible score of 2.642. So the first sub 3 point score. 56 cars in the collection, 148 points. And I mean, dude, look at this. Most of the cars fall under has little moments. Many cars fell under requires a special tag challenge. It's just, you know, like 65% or more, even more than 70% of the cars are just in these bottom two ranks. In terms of cars that were worth salvaging, both the Hyundais were great, and the GTR was great too. Again, for this Mitsubishi, I ranked it highly versatile at the time because the other Evos were legendary, but obviously in the most recent car correction change, those legendary Evos have gone down. Right, I think at least one legendary Evo has gone down to the epic ranks, making this not being the best option to use anymore. So obviously this in today's current day would probably be just a versatile instead of a highly versatile car. But yeah, back then it was useful, right? And obviously that makes sense. In today, if this moves down to versatile, then this one right here is going to move down to require some criteria. But I digress. We're judging the cars by how useful they were at the time. And yeah, there was a lot of trash. There was just so much trash. I mean, this was just like 4-wheel drive, medium ground clearance Subarus with overinflated RQs, and then, you know, on top of that, you know, just a bunch of all service tire cars that were all just about the same to each other. It was a very, very disappointing challenge. You got the things like the Buforis, you got so many Subaru 4-wheel drive medium ground clear Subarus. I mean, think about it. Like, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, what else did we have? 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, it was not great. This was not a great. I don't remember what the prize car was. What was the prize car? I don't even remember what the prize car was. But we're just judging it based off the Ultras and above here. There wasn't a lot of great cars here. So yeah, overall score of 2.642. Moving on with Niklas' collection. Niklas' collection had an even lower score of 2.464. They were still keeping to the theme on this one, keeping it all German. And what's worse than a tag with a bunch of medium ground clearance Subarus? A tag with a bunch of medium ground clearance Audis. That's what. Record a special tag challenge. How many Audis do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, 8. Yeah, 7, right? 7. I think about 7. And then it has little moments. We got even more Audis over here. How many more Audis? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it doesn't have BMW. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's ridiculous. Again, these cars are just absolutely terrible, and you're never gonna need them unless you're forced to use them, right? Great example is this Audi A7 right here. I haven't fully upgraded. It was forced for something. It was one of the challenges down the line that reutilized this car. Again, that's a different story that we'll talk about later on in the video. There are a lot of cars that were reused throughout the challenges, and it kind of pisses me off because there are a lot of cars that were never used for any single one of these challenges as well. Moving on to versatile, honestly, in this day and age, Niklas would be worse now than it was back then, because this is a legendary now, right? This BMW, I would move this BMW all the way down to like Robin's Wonderful plus or minus 3 RQ. But yeah, back then as an epic, it was great, fair game, right? There was nothing good in this. You know, looking back at this tag, look at the epics that you could have gotten. Like the roof was good, the G80 BMW, yeah, that was great too. But then everything else was super lackluster, right? The Taycan back then didn't have amazing, it didn't have amazing handling. It was 83 back then, now it's like 87, fair enough, but like back then it wasn't good. So yeah, jeez, yeah, this is the worst one we've seen so far. 2.464. All right, moving on. We have Gunter. Gunter's collection was a breath of fresh air after the catastrophe that was Niklas. This is an overall score of 4.028. It was a very small collection, only 35 cars, and it surrounded cars from like the 70s. So at this point, right? At this point, it was still stuck to a theme. Like Niklas was all German. Gunter was all like 70s, 80s kind of stuff, and this was a great one. I mean, look at the cards you can get here. Really amazing cars like the Ford Escort, the Citroen Visa, which is still great as an epic. Some good legendaries, some off-road legendaries, slick legendaries. This was the slalom specialist, as Mazda 323. Countach at the time was great. Obviously now I think it's an epic, so it's kind of useless. But as an ultra, it's pretty good. In terms of the decent cars as well, I mean, I would say that this Mitsubishi is the definition of requires some criteria with its four-wheel drive, high handling numbers and high top speed as well. Yeah, this was pretty good. I have this Alpha fully upgraded now as well. Putting in requires a special tag challenge. Honestly, looking at it now, yeah, it still deserves to be there. Has little moments though. Are there any cars here that I would probably bump down? This Ford Sierra and this TVR, I don't know. Maybe in this day and age, people could say it's a special tag challenge kind of car. I can see that. That might bring its score down by just a little bit, but this is still a very, very high score. Yeah, if I move these two cars down, it would change the score to 139, but that's still very high in total. All right, moving on. Lena's collection. This is where it just stopped following a theme. Lena, Bavarian boss, right? These aren't Bavarian cars. I mean, why is there a GMC Denali and a GMC Yukon in here, right? But yeah, pretty decent score, all things considered, from what we've seen so far. 3.326, 52 cars, 173 points. There were some really good legendaries in this one, right? Like the Speedtail, there was Müller, there was the Peugeot L500, which was a brand new car at the time. Some decent epics like the BMW and the Audi R8 rear-wheel drive, and then there were some in the require some criteria tag, like the Regal that you can use from time to time, the Porsche GT2, which is pretty nice. But yeah, there were still a lot of cars in require special tag and severely overrated, but this is a higher score than you've seen from other tags, mainly because there are a decent amount of Der Kaiser cars and versatile cars at the same time. Now, moving on was Sabina's. Now, Sabina's, in my memory, was one of the absolute worst, and it did have a very low score. 2.693. There were 49 cars here, and only 132 points were amassed. Only 4 cars are highly versatile, 2 cars were rightly rated. And it's nice to see that there's some consistency here, because obviously I don't look at my older videos and older rankings when I make newer rankings. But in Legrand's challenge, it also has the Lamborghini Stoke, and I've kind of put it in the same rank for the same reasons, actually. So it's nice to see the consistency there. It's just like natural consistency. That's what I like. All right. Anyway, this was a freaking terrible collection. Again, we were greeted with a mixture of Audis, BMWs, and Subarus. Lower RQ epics as well. I mean, look at the numbers: 66, 68, 68, 68, 70, 70, 73, 73, and down here was 65, 65, and 65, and 70 as well. So, very, very bad cars here. The Lamborghini, probably one of the best ones, and that's a four-wheel drive. The Audi as well. These cars were fresh epics, right? This was after the car correction change. They used to be legendaries. They've gone down, so they've become a little bit more useful. But overall, this was an absolutely terrible challenge. I did not enjoy this one. Probably one of the worst ones in my opinion. Now, moving on. Hugo's collection came up next with a score of 3.076. It brought 52 cars and it gave 160 points. Der Kaiser gave 4 cars. There are a lot of ranks where the Der Kaiser is only 4 cars, by the way. Some good legendaries though. The best Radical you can unpack, one of the best McLarens you can unpack. Draco's always good. Pagani is fantastic. Rightly rated. There were the Bristol and the Audi that were decent cars. Some decent legendaries in here throughout as well. Honestly speaking, this Audi right here maybe would bring it down to require some crit. That would lower the score. It's quite significantly actually, because this is a 5-pointer in my calculations. If I moved it down to require some criteria, it would become a 3-pointer. So that would actually bring it down to 158 scores. 1.8, but that should probably keep it around about 3. But yeah, that's maybe one that I would consider bringing down, maybe. But yeah, overall, this was a pretty small collection, 52 cars. Not a lot of cars were in the bottom tier, which kind of helped it with its higher-ish score that didn't drop below, 3 points. But yeah, I digress. Moving on, Sarah's collection is up next. This had a score of 3.166, 48 cars with a 152 point total. Again, only 4 cars in Der Kaiser, 2 of which were ultra rare, 2 two of which are legendaries. Rightly rated, you know, a couple of Lamborghinis here and there. That Corvette is pretty nice. Some decent ultra rares, some of which had, you know, benefited from the RQ changes. So this used to be an epic, the Mirai used to be an epic, and then these two were just better ultra rares overall. Requires some criteria. There are some pretty okay-ish cars as well. This BMW has seen some use, you know, over the past couple of months, I would say, in this year. And then there were like some okay legendaries, like that rear-wheel drive Lamborghini that wasn't overinflated by drivetrain, and of course that 718 Boxster. I mean, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. So that was Sarah's collection. Then we have Filberto's collection. Filberto's collection had a pretty high score, all things considered. 3.648, 54 cars, 197 points, and that helps with having more cars in Der Kaiser and less cars in Robin's Wonderful plus and minus 3RQ. But look at this, you know, Robin's Wonderful plus and minus 3RQ, still a bunch of Subarus at the bottom here, right? I think this had the challenge with like the least amount of Audis. I think every single challenge has at least one Audi. There isn't a single Dodge here, by the looks of things. But there's always an Audi. There's always an Audi in every single challenge. There's always an Audi. I feel like there's always a BMW. There's always a Subaru. Not a Bentley, surprisingly, but yeah, it ain't great. You know, when they detached themselves from the themes. So when it wasn't just all American or, you know, all 70s or whatever it is, you know, when everything just became a free-for-all, there's an Audi in almost every challenge. It's freaking terrible. The legendaries and Filberto's were great, and that kind of carried him, right? They had the IMSA, they had the Centenario, the Radical was back again. So yeah, that was pretty decent. All right, moving on. Harriet's collection. This should be pretty fresh in the mind for a lot of us. Has a score of 2.859, 57 cars, 163 points. This was a challenge that I particularly had a lot of hype for, but I was very, very unlucky. The only epic I pulled from Harriet's collection from the free packs was this Volvo. I really wanted the SLS. I never got the SLS. Legendaries are good, but, you know, only 4 of them to our disposal. There were some decent ones here. The SLS was there as well, and then one ultra rare. Yeah, this was not a very good challenge, and it reflects on the score. I honestly feel like if you had a score of like under 3, you're terrible. Not to say that if you have a score over 3, you're good, but if you had a score of under 3, you're absolutely terrible. Last but not least, Legrand's collection, the one that we just reviewed, came in with a score of 3.142. I didn't like this tag, I'll be honest with you. And I was really surprised to see that it had a score of 3.142. Again, at the bottom, you're seeing some Subarus, right? Well, one Subaru this time. And then requires a special tag challenge. You're seeing, you know, the Mercedes Black Series that we're seeing again. A couple of BMWs here, a Skoda there, you know, KTM here as well. I'm actually genuinely surprised that this has a score of, you know, over 3. And I think that kind of is attributed to the fact that there are a lot of cars in that mid-range, right, that I rated. And then, you know, there were more than 4 cars in Der Kaiser. There are 5 in this one, I guess. Again, you know, legendaries are good. And that's been the blueprint for a lot of these challenges. Give them a bunch of crap epics, a bunch of crap ultra rares, but give some really good legendaries just to seal the deal. You know what I mean? So let's move on to the rankings. Moving on to the top 3. The best score was indeed Gunter's collection. Well, which had a the only one that had a score of 4.028. He had 35 cars, 141 points. In second place was Filberto with 3.648. Had a score of 54 cars and 197 points, or a score of 3.648. And in third place was Lena's with 3.326, 52 cars and 173 points. So there's a huge drop off there, right? From 4.0 to 3.6, from 3.6 to 2.3. Now, the differences between the scores for the worst ones are a lot smaller than the differences here with the best ones. So anyway, at the beginning of the video, we wanted to answer the question, who had the absolute worst collection tag? Put your comments down, put your answers in the comments below. Here you go. 3, 2, 1, boom! The worst score, congratulations, was Niklas. Surprise, surprise, it was the one where it was all German and it was just a bunch of Audis. Maybe that's why Hutch decided to go away from the themes, right? Because the theme packs didn't do well. But the theme packs didn't do well because of the cars they chose. Imagine if Niklas' collection had a bunch of rear-wheel drive Porsches instead of a bunch of four-wheel drive Audis, right? That would make a massive difference in the score. The second worst one was Tuma's collection, which was all Japanese, which was full of four-wheel drive Subarus. And then the worst boss that didn't have a theme, a strict theme, was Sabina's collection, which makes sense. Sabina's collection was terrible, with a score of 2.693. So these were the total: 2.464, 2.642, and 2.693. Now, before we end up today's video, there are a couple more observations I want to highlight. First of all, I want to talk about the cars that had multiple debuts in these challenges. So for example, the Audi S4 B7, for example, I realized showed up in 3 different challenges: Harriet's, Sarah's, and Lena's. Lena's is an epic, Sarah and Harriet as ultra rares. The Porsche 718 came on, which ended up being a very useful car for Harriet's collection, also showed up in Sarah's. The Mazda CX-60 showed up in Legrand's, as well as Tuma's. Now, look at this, okay? Look at the cars on the top, and look at the cars at the bottom. Tell me, which cars do you prefer? Do you prefer the group at the top, or do you prefer the group at the bottom? Okay, now what makes it significant is that the cars that are in the top group right here are the cars that showed up more than once in a challenge collection for a boss series, right? So we've seen the Mercedes SL 500 a couple of times. We've seen the Audi S4 a couple of times. We've seen the Mazda CX-30 a couple of times, the Subaru Impreza a couple of times, Audi TT. Look, in this freaking thing alone, there are like already 4 Audis, right? Is there an Audi back here? There is. So there's like 5 Audis that showed up multiple times across multiple challenges. Now look at the cars down here. You have the Dodge Charger 3, a fantastic ultra. Zenith E10. You got the Mitsubishi MI-EV Evolution, the Porsche 911 GT3 Touring, the Superstock, the I-Pace. You know what all these cars have in common down here? Out of every single boss challenge, they didn't show up once. Not once, dude. These are some really good cars that would have brought people to opening some packs, and they didn't show up once. You know what showed up not once, but more than once? These crappy lot right here. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, was it a success? Was it a success making these boss challenges emphasize cars that people don't really use? Because the reality is, in my opinion, if you make a challenge full of cars that people don't want to use, they're not gonna open the packs. It is what it is, right? Like, these cars are useless, and you know, if you're forcing it down our throats, it doesn't make it useful. It's like when I was a kid and my mom forced me to church. Yeah, that doesn't make me a good Christian boy. You know, absolutely not. I hated it. I don't want to go back to church anymore. It's the same thing with this. If you force these cars down our throats, you think we're gonna like them? No, we're not. Let us play with our Morgan Plus 8s and Cadillac CT4s and Porsche GT3 992s. Those are the fun ones. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. Let me know what you thought about this. I thought this was a pretty fun video to make. It was like a diary of like every single, you know, pack review I've done for every single challenge over the last year. But it is what it is. I'm glad it's over. I hope the challenges and you know, the carpools just get better from here on out. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to